That's it. December 13, 2025. It's year 4, day 293, since the full-scale invasion began. Welcome to the Daily Situation Report. Today's report covers expanded defensive measures in the Baltics, updates on the Ukrainian counteroffensive near Kupiansk, and the current situation in the city, conflicting reports from the other side, continued fighting in the Minorad area, and a marked series of railway derailments in the Russian hinterland, and of course many more. By the way, YouTube has now authorized me to reply to your comments with voice messages, so don't be surprised if I leave my voice message underneath, instead of just a long-winded comment. Personally, I think this new feature is pretty cool, because now I can make my connection to the world's best community a bit more personal than just through text. And I want to be one of those channels that even with 1 million subscribers will never be one of those that seem out of reach. Above all, not as someone indifferent to his community. Estonia has started building bunker facilities along its border with Russia. In the first phase, a total of 28 bunkers are to be built, of which, according to the Estonians, 7 have already been delivered in the Setomaa municipality area. The measures are part of the reinforced border and defense expansion, which is intended to protect the country from an invasion. So the construction of our defense in the Baltic region is progressing. So you also have to be aware that the currently planned defense installations are not necessarily meant to stop a potential enemy, but only to slow them down until the rest of NATO has caught up. The Ukrainian drone commander Yuri Butusov described details of the counteroffensive at Kupiansk. According to him, units of the Shatia Brigade broke through Russian blocking zones, advanced to the Osgil River, and cut off Russian forces deployed there. However, the complete liberation of the area is still ongoing, as Russian units launch counterattacks daily and, according to Ukrainian sources, deliberately use civilian infrastructure and civilians as cover. Part of this is said to have taken place up here, as well as in the remaining parts of the city. We've heard 2 commonly confused terms, so I'll briefly address them again. A counterattack is a planned major offensive operation with the goal of regaining lost ground or eliminating an enemy breakthrough. A counterthrust, on the other hand, is short-term and locally limited, and is mainly used to disrupt, delay, or push back the enemy before they can dig in, just so everyone is on the same page again. A counterthrust is usually much smaller than a counterattack, and it's also usually carried out immediately. There have been no further changes near Kupiansk since yesterday. Some Russian forces remain in the city center, and specifically here, that's where they're stuck, especially here at the level of the hospital. And while I was reporting on the Ukrainian territorial gains yesterday, someone commented under the video claiming that other channels are still reporting that the Russians have captured Kupiansk. That could also be the case. Perhaps you shouldn't solely rely on highly pro-Russian sources for information. Let's take a look at today's geolocations, and we can see it again right down here at the blue pin by the city entrance. That's where Zelensky recorded the video yesterday, and that's marked as 1.7 kilometers away from the last known Russian position. And you can't seriously believe that he, including a media team, would get 1.7 kilometers close to the front just to shoot videos on an open access road. With the current drug threat, and you know the drug threat from this war alone, that suggests there is hardly any Russian presence left. In addition, the Russians also released a video today at the red pin, up here in the north, where they call out to Ukrainian soldiers using drones. Kupiansk line, the Kupiansk line, Kupiansk line, Kupiansk line, the 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 Kupiansk line, Kupiansk line, the Kupiansk line, Kupiansk line, the 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 Kupiansk line. Kinber tries to explain the events with what is being told. In her accounts, the situation is described as difficult. You know, difficult is often a word on the Ukrainian and Russian side that is supposed to paraphrase the word very bad. Meanwhile, Efforts are underway to downplay Ukraine's successes. Among other things, it is claimed that Ukraine has thrown several thousand former prisoners into the attack. I also read something that said the only reason a successful Ukrainian counterattack was possible here again was because thousands of NATO soldiers helped and fought here. That's all nonsense, but the stranger the report, the worse things are. The posts also imply that earlier Russian claims of success were inaccurate. Several commentators point out that, contrary to official statements, Kupiansk was never fully under Russian control. Even Russian sources now confirm the general staff and Putin were previously given a sugar-coated or false view of the situation. Don't blindly trust all reporters. By the way, you shouldn't blindly trust me either, even if in 99% of cases the reports happened as described or I correctly predicted events. Longtime viewers know this. Do you remember the Battle of Bakhmut or Dibkir? At that time, I could predict which district and unit would be attacked next and how the Russians would act. And that didn't just come out of nowhere, but rather from my professional background. Nevertheless, of course, that's no guarantee of absolute accuracy, but rather an assessment, a forecast. So most of the time, you watch as many reporters as possible, just compare everything and check for any irregularities. And when you look at reporters like the Ukraine report, which is especially pro-Ukrainian, or military summary, which is absolutely pro-Russian, because that was the same person who said at Krink that the village was captured just because Putin claimed it, using that as proof. You know how critical the situation can be when only one opinion is accepted as correct, even though neither side provides much evidence. Whichever side you choose, you'll face major problems in many areas of life, since you won't be seen as credible. Unfortunately, nowadays opinions are more important to many people than facts, but speaking of facts, at that time the second strongest army lost once more, this time to a snail. Last year I reported that a snail, if it started crawling without sleep at the beginning of the full inversion, would have reached the Polish border by now. Today there's an update on that. By now it would have reached Vienna. United 24 illustrated this well. Many people will be upset, but that's just how it is. I think that might be because many people in Germany still see the Red Army in the current Russian army. Most of the fighting is now in the town, mainly near the hospital, which still appears under Russian control. Just a reminder, that's here. Now let's look at the next front section, which will be interesting today. For that, let's move a few kilometers further south, but still on the eastern front, namely here too. You can probably guess to Pokrovsk, the area southwest of Minarat. So everything here that is now marked in red, I have now drawn as Russian controlled. This is now confirmed, and fighting continues in the yellow area. In my opinion, there is more Russian presence here than Ukrainian presence. But this area cannot yet be marked as fully Russian controlled. There's another change here. The Russians advanced as well, and here at the green pin, did the Ukrainians try to fight Russian soldiers with artillery fire? We don't know if they're still there or if those were the only ones. Just to be safe, I marked this small section here in yellow. That's exactly between the new Russian section, which is considered Russian-controlled, and the site of the artillery attack. There's a small canal running through here. I've used that as a border for now, so I can later mark this section as Russian-controlled, if it actually is. In the city, little has changed. Fighting continues, especially near the train station. There have hardly been any reported here in the northern part, in the last 3 yellow areas. The main issue for Ukrainians isn't holding the city, but keeping the area open. That's an estimated 500-meter open area, which they use to get soldiers out, and of course, back in again. And that's actually what absolutely has to be held, because otherwise all the units in the city will be lost. Naturally, the Russians are trying to increase pressure there. In the Pinza region, 23 tank cars full of oil and 2 locomotives derailed at the chase station at the same spot. This resulted in contamination of an area of about 750 square meters. There is no information yet about the cause of the accident, but it probably isn't a coincidence that 2 trains derailed side by side in the same area. Similarly, 3 more tank cars derailed near Orenburg. However, it is also possible that the whole thing is related to the weather, since there was a massive pileup involving more than 20 vehicles not far from there. Surely one of my viewers works for the railroad and can leave me a quick comment about this. Is a derailment even possible in weather like this, or could it have been caused by some external factors? We know how it is. Partisans, especially in those regions, are very active and often operate on the railway network. Special thanks to Algo Crew channel members, especially Lieutenant Colonel Renica, Robert, and Ziller. Thanks for listening. Subscribe, like, comment, and see you in the next situation report.